I was exhausted, my feet aching from 14 hours on tile floors that never seemed to give. Maplewood Diner smelled of stale coffee and fried bread, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly above my head. It was the kind of rainy Thursday that made the streets of Willow Ridge blur into gray streaks, and the small diner felt like an island against the storm. I was folding a napkin into a seagull shape, a little trick my mother taught me when I was 6. It had become a habit, a tiny ritual that reminded me of home even after years of scraping by on double shifts. The bell above the door chimed, and the warmth of the diner met a gust of cold, wet air. I glanced up automatically, expecting another regular, maybe some truckers stopping for a coffee and pie. But he wasn't a regular. He moved differently. Even from the door, I could tell. The charcoal wool suit sheared rain in tiny perfect beads, the silver hair cut sharp as a knife, and a quiet, deliberate air of command that made the room subtly shift around him. He paused, letting the diner arrange itself around him, like gravity had a new center. I approached as he settled into booth 4, the one with cracked vinyl, and placed a folded newspaper on the table. "Coffee," he said, his voice gravelly but precise. "Black, and your home-style meatloaf if it's what the sign promises," I said automatically. My hands were steady, but my heart skipped when his gray eyes locked onto mine. Not a curious gaze, not an appraisal. Recognition, something older, heavier. My stomach tightened. He watched as I finished serving a toddler at booth 2, her chubby fingers poking at a napkin folded into a seagull wing. "Where did you learn to do that?" he whispered, almost to himself, but loud enough that it made me freeze mid-motion. The words, simple as they were, carried a weight that made the air between us feel suddenly thinner. I couldn't breathe. I glanced at him again. Recognition sharpened into something agonizingly precise. His eyes traced the small crescent scar on my left wrist. My scar. My secret map of a childhood moment I barely remembered. And he saw it. When he stood to leave, he slid a thick envelope across the table, a tip that was impossible. $10,000. My fingers shook as I counted the bills. I tried to refuse. "Sir, you can't. This is too much." He didn't answer immediately. He was staring at my wrist again. Then he placed a cream-colored business card on top. Henry Montgomery, Chairman, Montgomery Holdings. The name glowed in my palm like a brand of fire. I swallowed. The diner sounds fading behind the storm outside. "Your father's name is Daniel?" he asked softly, the voice of a man who had known too much, too long. My apron felt suddenly heavy, my hands damp. I had never heard this name come from anyone but my father's lies. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. The lie died on my lips. He nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, and turned, his long coat brushing the wet linoleum as he left. The bell tinkled. The black sedan waiting outside disappeared into the rain. I sank onto the stool behind the counter, the business card cutting into my palm. My mind raced. All the years of quiet poverty, of working double shifts, of holding secrets of my mother's past. Everything collided in a single, sharp awareness. This stranger, this man who might be my grandfather, had just shattered the boundaries I had built around my life. The napkin in my hand, the scar on my wrist, the storm outside, the $10,000 tip. They all whispered the same terrifying truth. Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. And suddenly, I was standing on the edge of the story I had never been allowed to hear. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady the racing pulse in my chest. The diner hummed quietly around me, but the world outside had shifted. And somewhere deep down, I knew that whatever came next, I couldn't run from it. Not anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about the business card in my hand. Henry Montgomery, my grandfather, and my father, Daniel Reynolds, had been hiding something bigger than I could have imagined. That night, I went home, rain dripping off my coat, and opened the files my father had left me. At first glance, they looked messy. Spreadsheets, ledgers, and stacks of invoices from the local Hartwell Civic Fund. But the more I dug, the more the pattern became horrifyingly clear. Black Mesa, 63 households, families who had lived there for generations. My father's name tied to every single transaction, each one hidden behind shell corporations and consulting fees that didn't make sense. I felt my stomach twist as I uncovered the first forged signature. My mother's name, Maris Reynolds, signed 6 months after her death, authorizing him to act on behalf of the residents' properties. The paper felt like ice in my hands. He had weaponized her memory. He had weaponized our silence. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the heater filling the small apartment. I couldn't believe he had done this right under my nose, using the guise of a charitable fund to funnel money to himself while destroying people's homes. I tapped at the keyboard, pulling up municipal records, council minutes, anything that might corroborate the fraud. The city website had been edited, memos replaced, even meeting minutes doctored. Someone had carefully orchestrated every step. I picked up the phone and called Eli Bowers, my lawyer. His voice was low and tired, but there was a spark of understanding the moment I explained the situation. "Eli," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I think my father's been running a shell game. He's using the Hartwell Civic Fund to launder money from these fake consulting companies. And the signatures, they're all forged." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "You're telling me he's going after the residents of Black Mesa and using your mother's name to cover it?" Eli's words hit me like a punch. "Yes, and we have less than 2 weeks before the final council vote. If we don't act, the evictions go through. I can't let him do this." "I'll meet you first thing in the morning," he said. "Bring everything, ledgers, scanned documents, anything that proves what you've found. We'll start building the case." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, heart racing. Every detail I uncovered made me angrier, but also more determined. I couldn't just sit back while my father, the man who had lied to me my entire life, threatened an entire community. I started organizing the documents, cross-referencing transactions, noting every suspicious payment and every forged authorization, Voss Vale Consulting, Hartwell Civic Fund, and my father's personal accounts, all connected in a lattice of deception that could destroy dozens of families if left unchecked. By midnight, I was exhausted, but relentless. I marked each suspicious document with sticky flags, yellow for money transfers, red for forged signatures, blue for doctored council minutes. Every detail mattered. Every number, every date, every signature. The evidence had to be airtight. As I stacked the final folder, I whispered to myself, "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about them. It's about everyone my father thinks he can control." The weight of responsibility pressed on me, but for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of purpose. I wasn't just Sophia Reynolds, the waitress at Maplewood Diner. I was the one who had seen through the lies, the one who would fight back. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I could still see his gray eyes, the recognition, the pain, the unspoken secrets. Henry Montgomery had left the door open, but I would be the one to walk through it. I would take the first step, document by document, truth by truth. The storm outside had not let up, and somehow that steady, relentless rain matched the pulse in my chest. I was ready. The next morning, I arrived at Maplewood Diner earlier than usual, my binder of evidence clutched tightly under my arm. I didn't have to wait long. Daniel Reynolds stepped through the door, rain still dripping from his expensive coat. His eyes locked on mine, a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Sophia!" he hissed, voice low but sharp. "We need to talk. Now!" I met him at the back alley, away from prying eyes and the hum of the diner. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You don't understand what's at stake. All this evidence you've collected. You're risking everything. We can leave. I can take care of you. Just trust me." I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. "No, Dad. I'm done trusting lies. You've used our family, the residents of Black Mesa, and even Mom's memory as weapons. That ends now." His eyes flicked to the small, ruined photograph in my hand. The only image of Mom, smiling at 18, standing in front of the Remington shipyard gate. "Give me that," he growled. Before I could react, he snatched it and flung it into a puddle of dirty rainwater. The picture floated there, soaked, ink bleeding into the grimy water. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. "That doesn't scare me," I said. "You can destroy a photo, but you can't erase the truth." The storm of emotions swirling around us froze for a moment as Henry Montgomery appeared from the diner's shadow. He was alone, wet hair plastered to his forehead, eyes sharp but weary. "Daniel," he said quietly, voice carrying the weight of decades, "I've been lied to. I was cut off from my daughter because of your manipulations. The separation wasn't real. It was your design." Daniel froze, mouth opening, but no words came. I looked between them, my resolve hardening. Henry turned to me, Sophia, I want to help, but this is your fight. I've been out of your life for too long. You must lead this. I took a slow breath, the wind whipping around us. I don't want to be saved. I don't want your money, your influence. I want the truth revealed, the community protected. That's what matters. My hands shook slightly as I adjusted the binder. I have everything we need: documents, ledgers, proof of forgery, council minutes, emails, and I'm not backing down. Henry nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of my strength. Then you have my support, he said, but it's your plan. I'll stay out of your way unless you call. Daniel, now pale, stepped back, his confidence crumbling. You think this changes anything? You're just one girl. I control the funds, the influence. I can make your life impossible. I met his gaze, unflinching. Maybe, but I'm not alone. The law, the evidence, and the people I've spoken to are stronger than your lies. You're not above this. You're not untouchable. For a long moment, silence hung, only broken by the rain pattering on the pavement. Then, Daniel finally backed away, realization dawning in his eyes. Henry watched us both, expression somber but approving. The first step is done, he said softly. Now it's time to finish it right. I bent down, retrieved the soaked photograph from the puddle, and pressed it into my binder. The paper was ruined, but the memory, the truth it represented, was intact. I looked up at Daniel, whose face was a mask of desperation and disbelief, and for the first time, I felt the power shift. Not from wealth, not from fear, but from knowledge, preparation, and courage. Let's go back inside, I said quietly to Henry. I have work to do, and it starts with stopping my father's plan. As we walked back to the diner, the rain washing the street in gray streaks, I felt the surge of control. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a passive observer. I was Sophia Reynolds, and this was the moment I took everything into my own hands. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale paper. I sat beside Eli Bowers, my hands folded tightly on the binder, heart hammering, but mind razor sharp. Across the aisle, Daniel Reynolds and Verity Collins sat with their lawyers, faces calm but tense, as if they could feel the storm coming. Your Honor, Eli began, voice steady, we submit as evidence the original notary book, emails confirming bribes, video footage of document destruction, and financial records linking the Hartwell Civic Fund to shell companies. He gestured to the screen. Grainy images flickered, Verity tossing ledgers into flames, Caleb's personal accounts showing fraudulent transfers. A hush fell over the gallery. I watched the faces of Black Mesa residents in the front rows. Fear and hope mingled in their eyes. Some clutched hands, others leaned forward. I could feel the weight of every family in that room pressing on me. This wasn't just about my father or his lies anymore. It was about the 63 households whose homes, memories, and livelihoods hung in the balance. The judge, Maeve Kincaid, looked down at the evidence with a steely gaze. Proceed, Mr. Bowers, she said. Eli stepped forward, flipping through the binder. Notice the signature of Maris Reynolds, Ms. Sophia's late mother, dated 6 months after her passing. This was notarized under false pretenses. Every transaction from that point links directly to Daniel Reynolds' personal accounts and shell corporations. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Daniel's face tightened, his usual composure cracking. He whispered something to Verity, but her expression betrayed her panic. Eli didn't pause. We have emails documenting bribes to local council members and memos detailing the so-called voluntary relocation of Black Mesa residents. The voluntary designation is fraudulent. The coercion is documented. Every step of this displacement scheme has been orchestrated by Daniel Reynolds and assisted by Verity Collins. I felt my pulse accelerate as the evidence rolled out, each slide on the screen a dagger into their facade. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Do the defendants wish to respond? Daniel's lawyer stood, smooth and rehearsed. Your Honor, this is a family dispute, a tragic misunderstanding. Mr. Reynolds acted in good faith to bring progress and opportunity. I stood slowly. Good faith? I asked, voice cold but steady, cutting through the room. You forged documents, bribed officials, and threatened the very people you claimed to help. My father used our mother's memory as a shield to profit while destroying a community. This isn't faith, it's fraud. Daniel's jaw tightened. Verity's hands clenched in her lap. The gallery was silent, the tension palpable. Each resident seemed to hold their breath, waiting for justice to tip the scales. The judge paused, then nodded. We will review all submitted evidence. Given the preliminary findings, the Black Mesa redevelopment project is suspended immediately pending further investigation. Any attempts to interfere with the affected residents will be met with strict legal consequences. A collective exhale passed through the room. I sank back into my seat, relief and exhaustion washing over me. Eli leaned close. "This is just the start," he whispered. "But you did it. You've stopped them for now." I looked at the faces of the Black Mesa residents, some tearful, some quietly smiling, but all relieved. No cheers, no fanfare. Just the subtle, profound realization that their homes and lives were temporarily safe. Stability had returned, and for the first time in months, the air felt lighter. Henry Montgomery, sitting quietly in the back, gave me a small, approving nod. He didn't need to say anything. I knew he understood. He had placed trust in me, and I had honored it. The binder remained in my hands, heavy with the truth, evidence ready for the next steps. But for now, justice had begun to catch up. As I left the courtroom, rain lightly pattering on the pavement outside, I felt a cautious hope settle in. The battle wasn't over, but Black Mesa had a defender, and I would see it through. I was no longer just Sophia Reynolds, the waitress. I was Sophia Reynolds, a force ready to protect the truth, my family, and my community. The morning after the court's ruling, I returned to Maplewood Diner, the bell tinkling as I pushed the door open. The rain had softened into a light drizzle, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the crisp scent of autumn leaves drifting through the air. I tied on my apron and straightened the sugar caddies, the rhythm of the diner now feeling different. Everything had changed, but life had to go on. I moved through the diner like I owned not the place itself, but the responsibility it symbolized. Every order I took, every coffee I poured, felt like a quiet assertion of order, a reminder that I was no longer just the waitress who served tables. I was a guardian of fairness, of truth, and of the community I had fought for. Residents of Black Mesa came in and out, still cautious, still wary, but their eyes held a flicker of relief. Some nodded at me, a silent recognition that the walls of deception had finally been torn down. The Maris Reynolds Scholarship Fund had been established in honor of my mother. Its purpose was clear: to give girls from Black Mesa access to education in engineering, logistics, and sciences, fields that built the shipyards, the very backbone of our town. I smiled quietly as I folded a napkin into the familiar seagull shape, placing it in front of a little girl with wide, curious eyes. The child's fingers traced the crisp folds, and I remembered teaching it to her quietly, silently, passing on a piece of family tradition. The folded napkin had become more than a trick. It was a symbol now, a reminder that truth and freedom could survive even after years of lies. Henry Montgomery sat quietly at the counter, a cup of black tea in front of him. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to remind me that even those with power could choose restraint, could honor justice over personal gain. I handed him a napkin, letting the seagull wing rest in front of him. His gray eyes softened just slightly, a shadow of the grandfather I had never known. I paused and looked around the diner. The damaged plywood that had covered a front window for weeks had been replaced with glass. The streets of Willow Ridge glimmered under the post-rain light. Residents moved about, quietly reclaiming their routines, their lives, their dignity. There was no triumphant cheering, no grand celebration, just the subtle, profound relief of truth prevailing and justice being done. Sitting behind the counter again, I reflected on the past weeks, the confrontation with my father, the hours of painstaking investigation, the court proceedings, the fear, the uncertainty. I felt a deep, unshakable calm. The fight hadn't been about revenge or wealth. It had been about righting wrongs, about protecting what was theirs, what had been stolen. And I had done it. A soft vibration from my phone reminded me that my audience was out there, listening. To everyone who followed the story from beginning to end, I want you to tell me what you think. Did this story move you? Should I continue sharing tales about women standing up for justice, for communities, for families? Please like and subscribe so you can hear more stories from courageous women like Sophia, who refuse to stay silent in the face of lies. I folded another napkin into a seagull, placing it carefully on the counter. The action felt almost ceremonial, a quiet tribute to the past and a beacon for the future. In that simple gesture, I found a sense of closure. Not a victory over one man, but a victory for truth, for integrity, for the generations to come. And as I poured a fresh cup of coffee for a returning customer, I understood fully that power, money, and fear could never overcome the force of justice when courage and truth stood firmly together. The diner hummed quietly around me, ordinary again, yet profoundly transformed. I breathed in deeply, savoring the calm after the storm. The seagull wing, the scholarship fund, the preserved community, they were more than symbols. They were living proof that justice, compassion, and vigilance could triumph, and that even in a world full of lies, one person's determination could make a lasting difference.